All right, guys. So you just finished watching that video clip talking about plot and structure. So just as a reminder, plot is how things are put together, right? It's certain elements inside a story. So let me write that down. Plot. It's details specific to the story. What happens, who, characters, how it's all set up. Okay, structure. That's a little bit different. Structure is how everything is put together. So typically we see this little thing. Okay, you guys have probably seen that since 6th grade. We call this narrative plot diagram. Now, narrative plot diagram, we see that all the time. And what we notice in this is that we always have the exposition. Okay? Exposition. Now, as author sets stuff up, we see in the exposition it talks about setting, what's going on there. We see the introduction of characters. We see what's not necessarily the overall conflict, but we start to see the world in which the story is taking place. So part of the exposition is setting. Part of the exposition is characters. Okay. Now, this point right here, we call this point where we're done with the exposition. It's where things start to happen. We call that the inciting moment. Now, wow. Inciting moment. There we go. So we call it the inciting moment. That's when the introduction to some conflict begins. One of the greatest examples of this is in The Hobbit. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen the movies or if you've read the books, but in The Hobbit, we are introduced to Bilbo Baggins. He's part of the Shire. He likes what he's doing. He's not crazy. And then all of a sudden, there's an inciting moment when a dwarf knocks on his door. And from that point on, Bilbo, the protagonist, the main character, his adventure begins. So that would be the inciting moment. Then we have rising action. Rising action. Okay, that's where the main character develops skills. They go on adventures. They have mini adventures, all that kind of stuff. So, just trying to think. So, in the Marvel movies, thinking about Captain America, the first Captain America movie, the rising action is when Captain America is going along and he's trying to raise money for war bonds. He's with all those dancing girls, all that stuff. And then he becomes Captain America. He goes off on an attack by himself and does that kind of stuff. Okay? Then we know this as climax. Now, one thing that I want you guys to think about with climax is that it's not necessarily where the most exciting thing happens. This is where a major choice, or the major choice, is made. Okay? This is where you can think about this in the first Captain America movie. Everything leads up to the point where Captain America decides that he's going to take the airplane and crash it into the ocean. Okay? This is where Bilbo, if you've seen The Hobbit, this is where Bilbo decides that he's going to talk to Smaug and he's not going to give the Orcinstone to Thorin. Okay? Lots of interesting things about climax. It's the major choice is made and you go from there. And then we have falling action. Okay. And after falling action, we have resolution. This is a typical plot structure. Now, what I want you guys to do, and part of an assignment, you need to draw your own plot structure for that clip that we just had. Notice, well, you know what? I'm not going to make that an assignment. Think about the structure, though. We'll come down here and we'll draw one out. Okay, so we have this just like that. So we have the dad as a character. We have the sister and brother. They're all going along. The inciting moment, they're climbing. Like southern Utah or New Mexico or something like that. So they're climbing in southern Utah, just where there's big rocks. Now, inciting moment. This is when the first guy falls. Okay, first guy falls. Now, from that moment, everything that happens is climbing up. Okay, we have the first guy falls, second guy falls, dad falls, and he pulls everybody down with him. We have the sister who is holding on, trying to get the cam back in, or to the mountain. All that stuff's going on. Now, when you think about the climax, where the most exciting thing is happening, it's not necessarily the most exciting, but where the major choice is made, Dad is yelling at Peter, the brother, to cut the rope. And if you remember, Peter listens to his dad. Peter cuts the rope. That's a major choice. Okay. Now, falling action, that's literal falling action in vertical limit. Okay, and there is falling action. Resolution, as you see, Dad falls. So, just those first 6 minutes of the movie follows this plot structure very nicely. Now, as we're going on with this idea of plot and structure, you will be creating your own plot structures for 2 stories. One is called The Lady or the Tiger. There's an answer sheet or a worksheet that you need to fill out as you read and follow along with that story. And then there's The Discourager of Hesitancy. Your assignment later will have to do with the plot and the structure of those 2 things. Remember, just as way of going back to this, plot, those are specific details focused in on what's going on in the story. Characters, where it's taking place, all that kind of stuff. The structure is how it's all put together. Now, as you're doing all this, one note, when you're dealing with structure, you've got to look for patterns. Okay? And I'm going to underline that multiple times because as part of this assignment, you will be able to answer some tough questions if you look for patterns.